who's coming to us live from Oregon. Dr. Penick.
Hi, how are you all doing? I thought I'd just chime in and share a couple of things to challenge kind of the mainstream thought. Although these challenges that I'm using to support this come from mainstream people, it's just not reported in mainstream media. And so first point I wanted to make was the fact that we have really low to no evidence of the fact that mask wearing at all does anything to prevent transmission. So if we're requiring children who, according to the World Health Organization, or really anyone that's asymptomatic, there's really no evidence to support that they're even able to transmit any sort of virus if they're not sneezing, coughing, feverish, whatever it is that would be a vector for transmission. And this is based on the World Health Organization's own statements. So here we are requiring a asymptomatic child to potentially put themselves in a situation where all of the evidence that we have so far actually supports the opposite. So that sounds maybe pretty crazy to some people, because you say, well, I heard this on the news, or I heard that such and such, said this. So let me just hit this really quick. I think it's better if I read it. Basically, CDC in two different articles has stated that there is no increase or no reduction, I should say, found in transmission from the wearing of masks, face masks. This is from an article that the CDC put out where they cross-examined studies done from various countries around the world where they use some form of face coverings. And this article, I'll provide all the links for these, but this article was done in May, and then in June 28th, on June 28th, they also stated that homemade masks are not considered PPE. And then say we'll use surgical masks instead. Surgical masks are on the box themselves. They actually will state that they do not provide protection against the COVID vaccine. So they will say that themselves. And so then people have come out and said, well, then maybe it'll protect someone else from being receiving this transmission. But one of the interesting things is that we have no evidence that someone, first of all, asymptomatic, as I mentioned already, could transmit. But it just think logically, and that's one of the things that we have to do. Dr. Witkowski was just saying that we have also an epidemic of fear. And so we're losing logic very quickly. And so if we think that it doesn't protect the person who's wearing it, how does it protect someone else? Because if the virus can go one way, it can go the other way as well. So we just need to think about these things. So someone will say, okay, well then you gotta wear an N95 mask. Okay, N95 mask, 0.3 microns is the size. That's a very, very, very small pore, but the virus itself is 0.125 microns. So it's actually a third of the size of the pore on the N95 mask. So even wearing an N95 mask, the viral particles can transmit. So there's really no way kind of around this argument. So let me just state a couple of other things. So OSHA states that both cloth and surgical masks will not protect the wearer against airborne transmissible infectious agents due to loose fit and lack of seal for adequate filtration. That's not even taking into account pore size. FDA, another authority here, states that masks are loose fitting and may not provide full protection from breathing airborne pathogens such as viruses. Let's see, I'm trying to skip through hit the most important points there. Not for surgical use and not considered to be personal protective equipment. The U.S. Surgeon General, Jerome Adams, states masks are not effective in preventing the general public from catching the coronavirus. Dr. Mike Ryan of the World Health Organization states there is no specific evidence to suggest that the wearing of masks by mass population has any potential benefit. In fact, there is some evidence to suggest the opposite in the misuse of wearing a mask properly or fitting it properly. The New England Journal of Medicine, which is a very kind of an authority among physicians as far as for providing evidence-based medicine, states we know that mask wearing outside of healthcare facilities offers little, if any, protection from infection. Just a few things there that just to trigger the thought is that why are we constantly seeing this mandate when there's really no true evidence to support any of the studies that have been done really have had poor design, and you will only see a one-sided approach to this thought. Okay, and then there's the evidence of risk or harm. So we know there's a decrease in oxygenation. We know there's an increase in the amount of carbon dioxide in the blood. These things can cause fatigue, brain fog. Your cells just aren't getting the amount of oxygen that they need. And then we may have the potential of trapped viruses for people who are wearing these. Not really a concern so much for kids because, again, they're not walking around as a virus factory. But if someone were as an adult, it could actually increase the risk for having a more adverse event. And some of these masks actually contain toxic materials. So that's another thing we don't think about. What are they containing? Do they have sort of flame retardant in them, or do they have fibers that are not beneficial for the body, depending on what the makeup is? And so no studies have been done around that. And then the last point I want to just drop really quickly is the psychological component. So if we're forcing kids, even if we take masks out of it, just not to be able to go to school and have this social interaction. I see my own son, and he lives at home. He's always been at home. He's very young, but he's walking around with this sort of sadness. My wife and I were talking about it last night. It's like, well, it's because all these kids are running away from him when he goes up to give his buddy a hug. He's like, oh, no, I got it. He takes off. And so I found my son one time in the garage crying, and he couldn't understand at 4 years old what is going on. Why are all these kids running away from me? And so think about this psychological impact of not being able to touch or interact or even see each other's faces, and how much brain development comes from us being able to read each other's emotions through the face that completely would be blocked out. So there's long-term effects that we don't really understand. And so just all of a sudden throw a unsupported by science and evidence mandate that could affect a whole entire future generation, I think is huge. So just food for thought.
Thank you, Dr. Penick. I'd now like to